Hello and welcome to Author Academia. How to create a hook. First impressions are incredibly important, and I don't want to scare you, but the first few lines in your story are literally the most important in your entire work, so choose them carefully. It doesn't matter if you have excellent ideas explored later in the story. If your audience isn't interested at the start, they'll give up long before you reach anything cool. Sorry if this wasn't what you wanted to hear, but it's the stone cold truth. If you're writing in hopes of being published for the first time, you have to start strong. Not writing a good hook is like showing up to a job interview in a stained beer shirt and boxer shorts. If you want to get that job, in this case published, you have to dress your story to impress. So what exactly is a good hook? According to the website Pro Essay Writer, a hook is a catchy sentence or paragraph in the introduction which serves as an attention-grabbing element. Now, this definition is meant for essays, but it certainly also applies to novels too. To give a couple examples of what a hook can consist of, I'll quote a couple authors, starting with Brandon Mull and his novel, A World Without Heroes. The prince dangled in the darkness, shoulders aching, ancient manacles digging into his wrists as he tried to sleep. Technically, this is his intro to his book's prologue, but it's the first thing you read of his novel, so I'm going to count it. To give another example, DJ McHale opens Morpheus Road, The Blood with Sidney Foley was about to die. Now, I just picked both of these right off my bookshelf, and I have to say the opening sentences are okay. Their following paragraphs are a lot more enticing, honestly, but I feel like the opening sentences themselves are not crazy good hooks. Now, I've read both of these books and loved them, so don't tear me apart for that gentle criticism. A better example comes from Leigh Bardugo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, author of Six of Crows, and his novel opens with, Juiced had two problems, the moon and his mustache. Sure, impending death and royal imprisonment is interesting, but let's get real. How in the hell could a man have a problem with the moon and his mustache? In my opinion, that's probably the book I would want to read, but maybe you disagree with me. That's fine. Hooks are meant to attract different demographics. Maybe you're more intrigued by Dying Sydney or the Dangling Prince. I mean, I must have been at some point, because I read the bloody things. I'm going to leave a link with plenty of good examples. If you want, you can try to imitate any styles you find appealing, but please do not copy them. So now that I've properly confused you about what a hook is, let's look at some strategies we can use when creating a good one. I like some of the strategies listed in the website Now Novel, especially their commentary on keeping secondary details minimal. In this regard, Now Novel states, knowing how to write a hook means understanding what to leave in and what to leave out. This begs the question, well, what should I leave out of a hook? I suggest leaving out anything that fails to introduce or involve the plot. I would also leave out anything that doesn't reflect the themes of your novel in some way. Context matters, and as interesting as a flying panda bear riding a bamboo pole like a witch on a broomstick might be, this panda should make sense with the rest of your story. Are you familiar with the term clickbait? To have a catchy news title or flashy YouTube thumbnail that in no way reflects what is actually in the news article or YouTube video? Don't do that when creating your hook. Bad. It's a surefire way to disappoint and anger your audience because they will feel misled. Leave out cliche beginnings. Some examples of a cliche beginning include a character waking up, a character showering, a character having breakfast, a character looking at their reflection, having a narrator or character talk about the weather. Your audience isn't reading your book for a weather report, so don't give them one. Of course, you can twist and transform cliches to create something unique, just be careful. It also isn't recommendable to create an info dump. I don't need to be an expert to tell you this one. Info dumps have a tendency to be boring, and it doesn't matter how quickly they establish setting, plot, and other story elements, starting your novel with one and shoving it in your reader's face is a good way to make them lose interest. It's often better to sprinkle this information in slowly throughout the story and gradually build the world by showing the audience, not telling them. People want to be swept away by your intro, not splashed in the face and then drowned by it. So what should you put in a good hook? Honestly, with the exclusion of the 3 things I just mentioned, just about anything goes. That being said, a technique which is fast-paced, exciting, and bypasses a lot of the introduction tar is called in medias res, Latin for in the middle of things. In this technique, a story begins in the middle of something. To give some general examples, a story could start in the middle of a fight, argument, maybe in the middle of a kiss. If an author uses in medias res, they can bypass a lot of checks and balances and just throw the reader into the action. However, when using this technique, an author has to be careful they don't confuse or overwhelm the reader with such a sudden introduction. To mitigate, just sprinkle in enough information so your audience understands. I'll provide a couple examples of in medias res hooks I just made up on the spot. Jacob's eyes shut open when the girl's tongue elongated and wrapped around his neck, choking him. For some reason, this was not how Jacob had imagined his first kiss would go. After the 3rd gulp, I realized my mistake and spewed wine all over myself. A ruined tux was the least of my worries. The vile vintage I had just consumed was unquestionably poisoned. Personally, I like the in the middle of things technique, but simply starting in the middle of something is not enough. As you might have noticed in the hook examples I gave, there was also another factor at work, this being conflict. Conflict generally consists of a problem or problems a protagonist has to face when trying to achieve a goal. In the first hook I gave, the main conflict at hand is that the character Jacob is being strangled by the supernaturally long tongue of a would-be crush, and this poses a problem not only because Jacob is about to die, but because whatever is choking him is a supernatural being of some sorts. In the second example I gave, the unnamed character is thrust into conflict because he consumed a large amount of poison before realizing his mistake, and he now has to find a cure for himself or he'll die as well. Creating a real emotional or goal-oriented conflict in your hook is a good way to pique a reader's interest because they are curious as to how a character would get out of whatever predicament they find themselves in. So I'll summarize what we covered in this video. Try in medias res. Don't info dump. Include conflict. Don't read bait. Don't read bait. You're creating a hook. Your hook should be flashy enough that you don't need a stinky clickbait worm on the end of it. Don't forget plot and conflict. And don't use cliches unless you use them creatively. Website The Balance suggests some other good hook techniques you can attempt to use to create a hook. I don't have time in this video to go over every single last technique, but I'm pretty sure you understand some of the factors which create an interesting hook, and some of the factors that you shouldn't include. Don't be afraid to mix and match hook techniques. You can combine conflict and medias res as I did, or you can ask your reader an ironic question in a ridiculous setting, or wow your audience with conflict and comedy as Six of Crows does. There are thousands upon thousands of different hooks that have been used to lure readers in to read more, and in this video hopefully you'll have learned how to create some of your own. If you're feeling brave, share some of your favorite hooks in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.